like another 2 blocks of theory, and then we can resume also group work. Okay. So basically now you guys have worked a little bit on the wireframe, so you have like a basic structure for the main blocks of the app. And so now it's time basically to bring this to the next level. The next level are mocks, what we call mocks. These are basically static forms of the design, so there's still no interaction, but they're a little bit more refined in terms of visual design. So for instance, we try to put like more care in making the right size of the elements, of the UI element. We try to use colors at this stage. We use like the right fonts. We take actually pictures, we put pictures in, icons into the designs. So mocks are basically used to communicate ideas, typically to stakeholders, and say, okay, this is the kind of directions we are taking with this design, and they can already be used to test with end users. So they have already enough details to conduct tests. Okay. So essentially, what do we need to do in order to move from a wireframe to mockups? Essentially, add images to our wireframes, add logos, add icons, and buttons, sliders, and all the UI system components that are typically present into design interfaces. All this stuff, we call them assets, okay? And the assets should be stored as separate files in your computer, and we are going to use them also next week when we are going to tackle interactive prototyping, okay? So one of the first type of assets that you might want to use are pictures. Actually, pictures are very important in UIs. I mean, we use it all the times, and sometimes we use it to convey meaning and to bring like more life into our content. And obviously, we need to choose pictures that we can use in public presentations and in UI. And so these pictures needs to be copyright free. I mean, if you are working in a company that has budget, for instance, Google, for instance, when we were working for, I was working there, we had budget for that, so we could hire basically professional photographers, and they could shoot basically pictures specifically for the kind of purpose that we had. But obviously, in the context of many other applications, you don't have budget for that, so you need to rely on websites where you can get free pictures that are copyright free, and so that you are welcome to and able to reuse for different purposes. So here you have like different possibilities, different websites that actually give you this option. Sometimes they ask you to credit the author of the picture. You can add that in one specific part of your design, or if it's a presentation on the last slide of your presentation. Sometimes it's not even needed, but it's always nice to recognize somebody else's work. You might also need icons in the next couple of days, and same thing goes for icons. This is a work of art, so you should try to get to royalty-free icons. There are like 2 possibilities here: the Noun Project and Font Awesome. These are 2 distinct websites you can use for that purpose. The interesting thing about the Noun Project is that they have a very good system to classify icons. So you can put like a verb, or you can put like a word, and it gives you basically the icon that corresponds to that verb. So if you don't know how to represent visually an icon, I don't know, for to print something or to trash something, then you go there and you put the verb, and it gives you like plenty of options. Okay. Then another thing that we are going to use today are what we call sticker sheets. In French is autocollant. So these are basically templates that have been prepared and ready by designers, and they contain lots of reusable UI components that you can simply copy paste into your design, basically to represent that component. Say for instance that you need like a calendar in your app, and you don't have to reinvent the calendar. You can simply go here, take this canvas, you copy this component, and you put it into your design, and you're done. Basically, you just need to customize. But the interesting thing about these sticker sheets is that they are fully digitized. They are not images. I mean, you can go here and change the month or change the year, and so you can basically reuse it pretty fast. Okay. So what do you need to do basically to develop your mock? You basically start from a starting point, one of your mocks, and then let me go back here. So you choose from the sticker sheets basically one of the screen that is closer to one of your designs, okay, one of your wireframes. So you copy basically that component, you put it into a new presentation, and then you start modifying basically the visual elements to make it closer and closer basically to your wireframe. So here there are like two bundles of sticker sheets that you can use for the context of this course. So if you're a person that typically uses Keynote, you can download this one. If you prefer to use PowerPoint, you can download this one. And once you download that, it's a gigantic zip. It's like 200 megabytes. And after you download that and you unzip it, this is the content that you are going to see in the folder. So you have like the different UI elements. So say that you are designing for the web, then you probably need to open this folder. If you want to design for an iPhone, then you should open this one. If otherwise you are designing for Android, it's probably this one, okay? So if you open this folder, you're going to see basically a bunch of presentations. These are point keys for keynotes. So you should probably open this is for wireframes, so probably it's the Web 2.0 Flat UI library. And after you do that, you have like a bunch of slides, and in each slide there are like UI components, these stickers basically that you can reuse. So all of these are you can customize, so you can select and copy and put it into a new presentation to start building basically your mocks. Okay. So for instance, you select the element, copy, and you paste into a new presentation, and then you start editing the text. Okay. Okay. Now, after you're done with that, so you have like a bunch of screens basically that start to look like high fidelity. Then you also want to add like a UI map. And besides, this is one of the components that we are going to ask you in D3. So you should provide, together with your mocks, basically also a UI map. What is a UI map? Is something like this. So you have like a bunch of screens for your application, and then you want to have like arrows that tells you, okay, from this screen I can go to this screen, and then from here I can go to this one, or I can go back to this one, right? So essentially it's a navigation map that shows you that from one screen you can go back and forth to another screen and so forth, right? And so how can you do this? The simplest way to do a UI map is to have like a big drawing space where you have all the different screens, and then you start adding arrows. Otherwise, if you want to go a little bit more high tech, you can also use this software that is free of use for 15 days, I think. It's called Overflow, and essentially it allows you to build something like that. Okay, but don't bother too much. If you don't want to use this one, you can also go with a simple solution. So in summary, basically, why do we need mocks? Because basically it's the next step towards going high fidelity, having like an interactive design. We want to start a little bit putting like more flash and colors into our basic structure of the app. So here you can really start working on the icons, on the fonts, on the logos that you want to add into your design. Here you can really start taking care about like the actual size on the screen. I mean, how many pixels is this going to occupy? Is this going to be legible? Is the area that is covered by these elements is going to be enough for people to being able to select it? You know, these are all questions that you can answer by going a little bit more high fidelity, okay? So that's why we need mocks. So I'm going to skip to the next module so that we finish with the theory and then we can go back to design. And so the next thing I wanted to talk about is what we call prototyping techniques. So what is prototyping? Essentially, it's a technique that you can use in this part of the UCD workflow. So we started with sketching basically last week. Today we are seeing basically prototyping. Next week we are going to talk about prototyping, which is the next phase in our timeline. Prototyping is something that is still fuzzy, still in between these two stages. And the reasons why we need prototyping is because oftentimes basically before I actually start investing heavily into a new app or a new design, we still want to make sure whether the idea we're trying to build is actually the right idea, okay? So prototyping is actually not a typo. I mean, the PRE is a short for pretending, okay, in English. So we are faking the idea that is behind the project for the sake of gaining understanding of whether it's the right idea, okay, before actually building it. And so the basic example of a prototyping technique is what we call the Wizard of Oz. Have you ever heard about this before? Yes? We have somebody in the room that heard about it. So this is a very famous experiment. It was done at IBM in the 80s, okay? So IBM at that time wanted to build basically a speech-to-text engine, because they were considering, you know, to give this to every office, to give it to people in management that wanted to dictate letters instead of typing letters, as it was a very lengthy process. They wanted to give like this piece of technology to them so that they could simply speak, and then the computer would translate that into text, okay? But at the time, building like a speech computer was quite expensive. They had to invest millions of dollars to do that. So they said, okay, before we do that, let's actually check out whether people would like the idea. And so they fake it for the sake of answering this question. So how did they do that? Well, they had like two rooms. So this is a wall, okay? So the person sitting in this room couldn't see what was happening in the other room, okay? So the person on this one was like a participant in one of these experiments. So they invited him or her basically to the room. He was sitting in front of something that looked like a very fancy PC, and then there was this microphone, okay? So the person was actually speaking to a machine. It didn't know that on the other side of the wall there was an actual person that was listening. This was a past typist, so it was like a professional, right? So it was listening to the speaker and then typing on a regular computer, right? Nothing fancy at all, okay? And then the output was displayed on the screen. So essentially the person here believes that it was like a computer doing the job, while in fact it was just a regular guy, okay? But why did they do that? Is because actually they wanted to answer the question, is it the right idea we want to build? Before actually investing months and millions of dollars to do this, I mean, are people going to like the idea? And then at the end of the experiments, they decided to cancel the project because most of the people in the room actually expressed the dilemma that after a while they got tired of talking to a machine. The other thing is that they didn't trust the machine with private and sensible information, and so they wouldn't trust basically to give it like very sensible or policy related to their company and stuff like that. They prefer to have like an administrative assistant doing the job because it was like more of a personal and human connection with the person. And so in the end, I mean, there wasn't like so much of a hype around this, and they decided to cancel the project. So yeah, this is a summary of what I already said. This is another famous example. This comes from Apple. So at some point, basically, Apple got very famous because they built, the Palm Pilot. Actually, sorry, this is was a different company. Then Apple also did something similar. But the inventor of the Palm Pilot, before actually coming out with the actual product, started with basically a block of wood. Okay, so he took basically a piece of wood. He attached basically on top of that a piece of paper, and he was walking around for a month basically with this stuff on the pocket. And then whenever there was like a need for something that would address one of the use cases that he had in mind for this device, he was pulling out this piece of wood, and it was actually faking that it was actually interacting with this piece of wood. So the purpose of doing that is that he wanted to feel for himself basically whether there was like a real need for that, whether he would pull enough times basically this piece of wood out of his pocket before actually spending the time to actually build a prototype for it. Because going from this to that actually took years of work, and then going from this to that additional years. Yes?
So what's the purpose of the object?
Oh, you don't know what is a Palm Pilot. Okay, this is like the predecessors of. I started realizing that I'm getting cold. This is the predecessor of a smartphone. Okay. So this is like back in the days where phones were only used for making phone calls. Okay. So you couldn't do anything else with a mobile phone, and so. Actually, at the time, I'm not even sure there were like cellulars around.
Just for meeting.
Exactly. So the Palm Pilot was served the purpose of taking notes, checking your agenda. So you could sketch stuff, and it was digitized, and then you can transfer this stuff to your desktop PC. What else?
GPS, no?
No.
But it's basically a smartphone that back in the day.
It's not even a smartphone.
No.
I mean, it's probably capable of doing like 2% of what a smartphone does today.
Yeah, but it's like taking notes, looking at your meeting.
Check your agenda mostly,
Yeah.
and then you could also take like voice notes. I think with this.
I mean, the crucial difference to now, so is this area at the bottom you can see with the 4 icons around it.
Yeah, this one.
This was a space that you had to basically, I mean, it was handwriting recognition.
Oh yeah, there was
to write
handwriting.
every single letter one at a time, basically, to put it on the screen.
So that was like one of the killing features. So you could actually handwrite, and it was digitizing your handwriting and taking like digital notes.
Okay.
So, yeah. But to build that basically was super hard at the beginning. So this is one of the prototyping technique. I already talked about this. This is the mechanical Turk. This is the Pinocchio, which is the Palm Pilot examples that I just give you. Essentially, this is like another example. I mean, a group of scientists wanted to build like this tool for surgeons to perform like surgery, but before actually building the actual thing, I mean, they did like a fake prototype, a very fast prototype, just to test like the look and feel of this object. Right? This is like another technique that you can use, like the minimum viable product. Try to strip it down to the main functionality and make it work, just to test the main idea. So here they wanted to build like a battery pack for the iPad. Okay, So before actually spending time and energy to actually try to squeeze this to the smallest amount of space, perhaps build like a custom lithium cell for the purpose, they just bought like out of the shelf a bunch of regular batteries. They attached the wire in a way that actually was summing up to the amount of power that was required to power up this device, and then they stuck that into a pillbox so that they could simulate like pretty much the look and feel of this kind of battery market. This is actually quite interesting and it's quite powerful in marketing, and I've seen it used multiple times here at HEC. It's called the landing page. You guys probably have seen this in other courses. If you haven't, I'm going to talk about this very fast. Have you seen the comedy Silicon Valley?
Yes.
Yes. So you probably know about Pete Piper. And this was like this fake company that was invented by the characters in the movie, right? And they talked about, in the comedy, basically, they go at length about explaining basically the technology that was behind Pete Piper. And somebody actually built like a fake website around this. And so you can actually go and visit as if it was like a real startup. The interesting thing is that at some point on the of the web page there is this field, email me when this is ready. And actually people subscribe to that, right? And after a while you start collecting data about how many people are actually interested in the product even before you actually build it, okay? And you can actually use this data. I mean, some of you actually came to me today and show me like something similar that they have done in a questionnaire, trying to actually capture, to gauge basically interest from people using a questionnaire. It's the similar idea, basically trying to have like some data that comes from outside, trying to see whether people could be interested even before you build it. And to that extent, actually, if you instrument your fake web page with analytics, which is quite simple to do, you can actually know lots of things about people that visit your website, where they're coming from, their typical profile, the parts of the website that they spend the most time on, and stuff like that. And all of this information actually is for free, and so you can actually learn a ton of things even before you start investing in building that technology. This is the impersonator. We are going to watch a video about this. Let me see if the audio plays. Okay, now of course, the audio.
No, I think it works, but I've seen a good behind the scenes. C'est pas un groupe qui a baissé le son avant.
Ouais,
Sur la
c'est-
télé, non? Ouais, c'est sur la télé. Je sais pas si c'est possible.
Non, mais je peux franchement si c'est sorte.
Oui, mais même après, tu vois, ça change.
Ah, ça marche pas, ouais,
Ah, c'est ça,
So this company actually, they wanted to check whether this idea for a key handle was actually good. So what they did is that so they drove to IKEA. They dressed as an IKEA employee. And then when nobody was looking, they actually attached that to one of the room, and they actually put like a bunch of samples. And then people bought them.
Get on the back over there.
And then obviously they couldn't fully buy them.
Oh, no worries. Oh, for real? Oh, there's a whole stack of them back there. Too long.
The thing is,
It's not mine, eBay.
that by the time they actually did the video, IKEA had changed the shirts. And the official ones are with stripes, and you didn't have the stripes.
No. Yeah, no, thanks though. I'm Justin, by the way. Cool, thanks, man. Get that audio.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So, I mean, they took advantage basically of the the distribution channel of IKEA for the sake of testing whether the video was nice. Okay, so in summary, prototypes are a good way basically to test whether you have like the right idea before you actually build it. You can use these techniques basically to gauge interest from potential buyers, your potential clients. I mean, typically for this class, I mean, this is not required, right? I mean, it's not something that I will ask you to do in the context of your capstone project. But if you manage to pull some of these off, this is typically one of the things that will bring you to a 6. Okay. Now, I'm not asking you to go to IKEA. All right, so
We're gonna end this prize like that.
So for next class, you basically need to develop mockups and UI maps. This is part of what I'm expecting to see in the presentation. And also you can run a very short and fast heuristic evaluation among yourself in your team to make sure that everything actually works. And also one extra thing, I mean, next class is particularly important for the software engineer in your team, because those will be there will be those basically that are going to actually develop the interactive prototype. So before coming to class, you should create an account on proto.io, send an email to Gabriela with your email associated with your account so that we can extend it to a month. And you should also watch these tutorials, okay? So that we actually shorten the amount of time that it will be required for us to train you on this software, okay?